Solve negative x squared plus 2x equals 5 using the quadratic formula. Again, the quadratic formula x equals negative b plus or minus the square root b squared minus 4ac divided by 2a. Just a little hint for you, if you write that formula down every time you work a problem solving using the quadratic formula, you will on accident memorize it, which is a very good thing to do. This equation is not in standard form, and it's also not equal to 0, so we want to make it equal to 0 so that we can solve. So I'm going to take this 5 and move it over to the left side by subtracting it. That's going to give me negative x squared plus a 2x minus a 5 equals 0. Again, there's no like term for this minus 5, so you can't put it with the x or the x squared. It just stays by itself. And then we can identify our a, b, and c. A is always in front of the x squared. There's no number there, but there is a minus sign, so that would be a negative 1. B is in front of the x, so that would be 2. And then c is always that number by itself, that constant, which is minus 5. Once you've identified a, b, and c, plug them into the quadratic formula and then simplify it down. So I've got x equals negative. In the place of b, I'm going to plug in a 2. Plus or minus the square root. I'm going to have b squared, that would be 2 squared, minus 4 times my a, which is negative 1, times my c, which is negative 5. And then that whole thing will be divided by 2 times my a, which is negative 1. So once you plug it in, you got to simplify it. So I'm going to go over here, and we will simplify. Negative 1 times 2 is negative 2, plus or minus the square root. 2 squared is 4. I have negative 4 times a negative 1, which is positive 4. And then 4 times a negative 5 is a negative 20. And then 2 times negative 1 is negative 2. So we can simplify this as negative 2 plus or minus the square root. 4 minus 20 is negative 16. Divided by negative 2. And then we want to simplify the square root of negative 16. Now we know that when you take the square root of a negative, it's always going to be imaginary. So this simplifies to x equals negative 2 plus or minus. To take care of the negative, we pull an I out. But then we have the square root of 16, which we know is 4. So I'm going to have 4i for the square root of negative 16. And that's going to be divided by negative 2. And then you look at your numbers in your numerator. Can they both be divided by negative 2? Yes, because negative 2 goes into negative 2, and negative 2 goes into 4. So what we want to do here is we want to reduce this fraction. So if I go negative 2 divided by negative 2, that gives me a positive 1. And I still have my plus or minus. And then I'm going to go 4 divided by a negative 2, which when you do that gives you negative 2i. So my solution is x is equal to 1 plus or minus negative 2i. This is a complex number. We got the real and the imaginary part. What this is saying is that if you were to graph this equation, it has no x-intercepts. So it has no real solution because there's no real x-intercept, but it does have 2 imaginary solutions. And the imaginary solutions are 1 plus negative 2i and 1 minus negative 2i.